We have a very special episode for the Science of Rowing podcast. I'm very pleased and honored to introduce Dr. Paul Laursen of HIITScience and Athletica. Paul, first, thanks for taking time to make this podcast happen, and very excited to welcome you here.
Oh, Joe, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, super excited to have a convo.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. I think we're going to get into some good stuff. So for our membership or audience that follows our work that may not be familiar with yourself and your background, why don't you just take a couple moments and introduce yourself and just, a little bit about your career and what you're currently doing. And then we can kind of get into some more of the details.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Canada, Vancouver, and followed my dad around, who was a runner, and then moved to being a triathlete, and that inspired me to try to do the same. And typical story, failed athlete. And at the end of the day, turned to science to try to find answers to questions. And that journey took me to Australia originally. I got a PhD scholarship to the University of Queensland to do my studies on HIIT, or high intensity interval training, which is what I've become a little bit known for. And yeah, that work really started the sort of the foundation of what it is that we eventually built, the high intent, the HIIT science, or the science and application of high intensity interval training, with my colleague Martin Buchhiet, who joined me in Australia from France to kind of start on the pathway to really try to uncover, how to pull the levers of training, the intensity of the work bout, the duration of the work bout, the intensity of the recovery interval, and the duration of the recovery interval. Lots of ways to skin a cat. Well, what's the best way? And of course, there's no easy answer to that. Always so contextual based. But yeah, from a passion in the sport of triathlon to really devoting a lifetime to science, that also caught the love for coaching myself too. So I'm not kind of one of these academics, and I don't want to point fingers or anything, but I'm not just an academic that just sort of sits in the ivory tower and says, the science supports this. I'm like, there's coaches have so much to offer, and really we steal so much of the of our work from them as well. But I really like to kind of play in that middle space, much like you guys do, I think, with science and rowing, right? Like, it's okay. Here's what the science says, but here's how it might actually apply at the coal face. Here's the translational aspect of that. But we're always sort of saying that, you as coach or athlete or practitioner, you understand your context, you kind of know the most. But yeah, that's a long-winded intro. That's kind of where I went, and now I'm back in Canada now, and working with HIITScience and Athletica. Oh, I guess that's, the AI kind of arrived as well, right? So we basically put, the textbook into AI as well, and that's Athletica, which is an application, software that tries to apply that tech and those foundational principles across the sports of triathlon, rowing, cycling, and running.
Very cool. So um, you were awarded that PhD scholarship, which brought you to Australia, and that project was focused on HIIT. So interestingly, during that experience and that journey, what what propelled you to kind of continue to do work with HIIT? Was it just enjoyment out of some of the research you had done, or as you had started to do that and conduct those initial studies and stuff, you were like, I think there's a lot more here,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to go a little deeper down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. It's exactly that. And this is kind of the fun thing about research, is that as soon as you, whenever you ask one question, right, and maybe maybe sort of answer that question, but 1,000 other questions kind of just come up from that, and that's exactly what happened with HIT. I did my PhD on it, and I started making inroads into understanding the different ways to skin the cat and the outcomes from it. Specifically, I was kind of looking at, so-called VO2 max intervals, compared that with like sprint interval training. But it's just like there's so many different formats. And yeah, like this, fast forward 20 years after all the research kind of takes place, I mean, just to almost lead off into HIIT science, there winds up being like 5 key formats that tend to work best and tend to be almost, considered best practice in terms of, prescribing a format. We call them weapons in HIIT science.
I was just gonna say, I love that, the language that you and Martin used, and I think I actually remember listening to one of the other podcasts. I think you were both on it, and I think at the time when you were writing that, and it was under review, I think you had to kind of wrestle a little bit with the reviewers about using that particular language and stuff. But
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah. We started in like the classic reviews is they're two of the most cited reviews in the literature period in sports science. And it's the same title, Science and Application of High Intensity Interval Training. It's a part 1 and a part 2. And but yeah, the reviewers, oh my gosh, the review process went on forever. Almost like, I mean, think that the work was ready to go to press for 2 years ahead of time, but it was like that's how long it was pretty much in review for.
wow,
But thereabouts. And they didn't like the language with using weapons. And but yeah, we kind of thought, well, as a practitioner, like we either have to have tools in our tool belt, or we got to have weapons at our disposal, right, that we
yeah,
can hit, and we can hit targets with those weapons. And
yeah,
that's sort of how the weapon and target kind of approach, because that's really the philosophy that we take, is that sometimes you go into your programming and you're pivoting your mind to, is like, okay, I need more oxygen content to in that athlete to enhance performance, right? And so you've got like an aerobic target, right? So then you need a HIIT session that hits the aerobic target. Or like we spoke on before, Joe, like you might have a neuromuscular or anaerobic target. Well, we've got certain weapons at our disposal, that we can use to go and target the anaerobic neuromuscular system. And that's kind of how it works with the whole HIIT science philosophy and protocols.
yeah. That's great. I mean, that's one of the elements that I really enjoyed reading those papers, and then I have a copy of your textbook as well. Um, because I think on the surface, like you hear HIT, and your mind sort of goes to one thing. And I think, and reading your work, I think one of the things that made me appreciate was, one, context, and two, there is such nuance here. We can
Mm.
really get some different responses and different adaptations depending on the structure and prescription of those sessions. And so it's just another level of depth and maturity, of applying, high intensity interval training. So it was in a lot of ways, one, it was really good for me to read in terms of my own development, but also I think, in some ways, like kind of a revelation, right? You don't typically see that. And so it was great.
Yeah, well, thanks. And that's something that, credit to Martin, my co-author, really for knowing this. And he knew how practitioners were mostly thinking at the time, and they were really thinking like, okay, they were just thinking like format first, like, okay, I'm just going to apply, it's a training program, and I just need to apply a VO2 max program, or it's a training program. I've got an athlete, then I know I've got to apply sprint interval training for that athlete, or repeated sprint training, whatever it kind of may be. There was just like a prescription, blanket mindset, like a recipe that you memorized. But we challenged within HIIT science, philosophy, to take a step back and just look at what you have in front of you. Look at the athlete. Look at the animal that's in front. Then look at the demands of the sport that you're trying to kind of bridge with for that athlete, and now think, okay, so what is the target that I need to enhance that athlete's capabilities? And that's really the whole thing. It's like it's just a step back in the mindset. It's still using all of the tools at our disposal, but it's taking a different mindset and more of an individualized kind of approach to say that athlete there is deficient in anaerobic neuromuscular quantities, right? For who knows what it might be, right? But like you've got good evidence that that person is lacking in there. So let's target that. Let's apply in our programming a weapon that is going to hit those targets and make enhancements in that individual's capacities in that area. So
So you use the word individualize, and that's exactly kind of where my next question was going to go. So from practical standpoint, what are some of the challenges in a team sport or team setting in trying to individualize some of these HIIT sessions, right? So you recognize that we know the demands of the sport. Some of the athletes on the team have different physiological strengths or weaknesses, and we want to be a little bit more targeted with what we're trying to do. Um, is it as simple as just having them do different sessions, or have you had to sort of navigate some conversations with athletes and coaches where you got to gain a little bit of trust or buy-in to, sort of diverge, and we're going to have uh, athletes on the same team do some different training sessions to try to get the best performance out of them as possible?
Yeah, well, we're really, so just to rephrase, we're looking here at the individual athlete challenge, and it's a huge can of worms, right? Like that you're opening up right now, because there are so many elements of individualized capacities that we have to consider. How well trained is one athlete? Like, what's the recency of a training stimulus in that athlete? What's their abilities? How like are they? Do they actually have capacity to produce power, or and for what duration? Then what is their fiber type makeup? Like we know that we've got like um, different phenotypes, they're called, right? So you've got certain individuals who come or are gifted with like lots of fast twitch fibers, or they're gifted with lots of slow twitch fibers, depending on whatever sport that they gravitate to. So you've got to really kind of consider all those things, the mental component, the recency of a neuromuscular stimulus, musculoskeletal stimulus that might be targeting the muscle damage and soreness. So there's just so many little nuances. So you've really got to consider the individual when we go and make an application. And this is really the evolution of Athletica. This is why, because of all these different things, right, that I'm spouting off right now, we needed sort of a tool to help us. And this is where it's kind of cool with wearables that are coming in here. We can tick a lot of these boxes now because the wearables capture a lot of this data, like from ability to recency to even the profile. We can even profile individuals now in terms of their anaerobic speed and power reserve. If you've heard of that concept, where we have individuals that come with the super huge twitchy characteristics, and they're very explosive, versus the diesel engine where they're not explosive but they can just go and go and go, right? We can actually see that across peak power versus max aerobic power, and we totally see sort of the profile, and then we can target the training in accordance with that, with all those various different means. Apply a lot of math, but at the end of the day, it comes out and just needs to be sort of a simple prescription for the athlete and coach at the end of the day. And that's what Athletica, with the backbone of HIITScience behind it, is now delivering for athletes.
Yeah. So your journey led you to do that PhD, and then the next step was writing the textbook, and then
Well, I skipped one part. I did 2 Olympic cycles with New Zealand first, because I wasn't just going to go and do. Yeah, I missed that part, right? So after 10 years in Australia and working with Martin, then and being a professor more, really just kind of supervising PhDs. Then I went to New Zealand and really got high performance experience and working with, like you with Portugal or Alex with, UK. I was embedded within the New Zealand Olympic program. So I kind of left that out. And specifically with the context of rowing, my buddy Dan Plews was working with the New Zealand rowing squad and big name rowers like Mahi Drysdale and Eric and Hamish with the twin duo, and then Emma Twigg. These are names that people in the rowing community would really know. So Dan working directly with them, me mentoring Dan and giving advice from time to time, but big monitoring projects all along the way, and loads of learning. Like none of this kind of comes after one day, and you just have an idea from it all. Like it's there's like
Evolution.
yeah, for sure. Like
So
just like why good coaches are, so good because they have so much experience and they develop wisdom over time. And I've just been fortunate to have some immersion and make loads of mistakes and then develop some wisdom along the way.
very cool. Yeah, it sounds like some incredible experiences along your journey. So, at what point did you, or was it you and Martin? Obviously, we have the textbook, but where was the seed kind of planted for Athletica in terms of this is something that we want to do? We want to move forward in building a platform that is going to integrate artificial intelligence because it's new. It hasn't really been done, and certainly the amount of thought behind it, and going back to some of the nuance in prescription, right, and taking into account the individual, right, and the context and stuff. All of these things that are super important to having sustained athletic performance and success. So where did that first seed start for Athletica?
Yeah, so a long while back, and this is just it. Like this was Um, I think one of our members in Athletica has coined it for us, and he said that Athletica, the 10-year overnight success story. It's like we've been building for 10 years. That's a long, long time. So the origin story comes from being like with my buddy Dan, we were both on a podcast, and we just kind of saw, because we're in the sport of triathlon, we saw all the sensors and wearables that emerged in those sports first: power meters, heart rate monitors, GPS, and the like. And we could just really sort of see, and then the whole area of artificial intelligence was just starting to be mentioned at that time. And I just kind of had a hunch, and I was like, you know what? That's where everything's going eventually. In 10 years, it will be there. And so we mentioned on a podcast, hey, if there's any developers out there that are listening and tuning in, please come back and reach out and let's build this thing. And my co-founder, Stephen Brown, from New Zealand, reached out and said, let's do it. And I don't know if it's the biggest regret of his life or the biggest happiness point of his life, one of the two. But it's like it's a lot of grinding for a long number of years. And then we started with the sport of triathlon, which is quite a complex sport, right? Because you've got 3 disciplines plus your S&C that's going on. But that, despite its challenge, really helped us, because then we can easily target the individual sports like cycling, and then went running, and then we can even target rowing now as well, which where we now, because we started with triathlon, we know how the other events, the what would you call it, cross training events, kind of need to be weighted in terms of a load marker, like a load measurement, right? We're using Bannister's fitness and fatigue modeling. So if the hardcore scientists in here will know about TRIMP scores and Bannister's load model. That's really the backbone of Athletica. So it actually, when there's exercises done and it's monitored, then we see that there's adaptations that are occurring, or adjustments in the training plan. Because as we all know, you can give an athlete on paper one thing, but what they actually go and do, who knows, right? Like maybe it's to the T, maybe you're with your coach and things get done just the way they are supposed to. but more or less likely that's not the case. But now with wearables, if you are monitoring well, we can get really, much tighter, estimates of the training load that is occurring. And yeah, and of course, in the context of rowing, we do that across both the concept 2 work alongside the on water work, and then working towards developing the S&C aspect of that as well, the neuromuscular aspect.
Very cool. Very cool. So how is Athletica pulling in some of the information, the data from a Garmin type sports watch, and using that to, one, I guess, not only help with the prescriptive aspect about the training program, but also to learn about the athlete, right? Because obviously, kind of the more you're going to feed information into Athletica, the more it's going to get to know that athlete better, and what it or who or sorry who not who, what the athlete needs,
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. Well, look, as a coach myself, I put my, can hang my hat on this statement, is that Athletica already does so much of a better job in some aspects than I can do as a coach, because of the way it's set up. As soon as you onboard onto Athletica, we immediately upload 2 years of your historical training data. So for the last 2 years, if you've been monitoring your training on Garmin to some level of accuracy, then we get what would be your rowing power profile or speed profile. Of course, there's limitations with speed and on water boat speed. We know all about that. But, we get what looks like your, how fast you can row or how much power you can row in short durations versus long duration, how much power over longer durations. So you've got that sort of that fingerprint or blueprint of your abilities right there. Also, as I mentioned, the Bannister Trimp model, that's again over 2 years. We can see how much fitness you've gained. So we can look at the recency of training. So, in terms of like, you don't necessarily get, with a blanket calendar template plan, right? You can just kind of get lumped with a base, a certain amount of training that you're prescribed right there and then. Well, we don't have to do it that way anymore. We can now do that appropriately. What is a little bit more training? Basic principle of progressive overload. What's the next sort of step based on what it looks like you've done? So yeah, that's kind of the next step of how it's already sort of superior to the job I can do as a coach. And then, thinking of, again, in the rowing context, where sometimes we have crews of multiple athletes in boats, well, is necessarily applying the same training program to all 8 of those individuals, or 4 or 2 of those individuals the best thing? Well, probably not, right? And we learned this with Eric and Hamish, is that, they were 2 different beasts. They were, Eric was an anaerobe. He was a sprinter. That's how his phenotype was. He was just such a beast, right? But Hamish was too, but Hamish was a diesel engine, and that's proven also because Hamish also went to win after his twins, gold medals in both Rio and London. He went on to becoming a time trial champion as in cycling. So just kind of prove the fact that he's totally a diesel engine, right? So Dan and his coaches that were training them gave different training to the different individuals. So they're very ahead of the game, right? But Eric would be given more of like the shorter intervals with less of a less longer work bout component that we know would exacerbate his sympathetic nervous system and possibly make him run down, versus Hamish, who's the classic diesel. If he's got larger motor units, they're laden with mitochondria still, so they soak up the hydrogen ions, and he basically hit them all day long with training. And that's the difference between the different types that are out there, and there's everything else in between. But that was a classic example of two of the world's best in, from a twitchy athlete to a diesel athlete, them really looking at the two, giving individualized training outside of the boat, and then they'd kind of come back into the boat and do things together. But that's how the system can actually, I believe, optimally work. Is that you've got to row as a team, great. So have those sessions, do those sessions appropriately. But then when you remove them from the boat and you've got the opportunity to do individual work, will make the individual work individual, and that's what Athletica tries to do, because it's always taking that data into account.
That's very cool. Very cool. So, um, definitely not a replacement for a coach, but
Nope.
enhances a coach. So,
Correct.
for a rowing coach working with a squad of athletes, um, what are some of the benefits in terms of you know saving time that Athletic is going to be able to provide that normally the coach would have to do, that they don't necessarily have to worry about or put as much time into as they may have in the past? And then what are some things that Athletica does to separate itself from other platforms in the space that other endurance athletes may be using?
Yeah. So we've kind of alluded to a few of them. So very first, right off the bat, you've got a little, as for a coach in mind, you've got a profiling experience, right? So if they've been monitoring, and we've immediately got um, a a power profile on that athlete, and then number two, we can actually see how much load they've been tolerating, so that we've got from that we can almost appropriately target a training session that's appropriate to that individual. Um, but then we also know that we can give a blanket plan to a bunch of rowers, and we know that they're going to respond differently to that plan. Even though they might visually look the same, we know that they all have a different load response because of different things that are going on in life, right? And it can be all these things that we've been talking about before, but it can also be emotional aspects, whatever, bad sleep, etc.
Sure.
So we also have a feature where, and this is what, again, this was Dan Plew's PhD work, who I was mentioning about the New Zealand team, right? So Dan Plews did his whole PhD on heart rate variability with Martin and myself, looking at load response. All the athletes I mentioned before were all using heart rate variability to optimize their plan. So that's what we also have embedded within Athletica as well. So you've got actually, and it's seamless. So you just if you're wearing your Garmin, you'll get an overnight nocturnal heart rate variability marker, and it just uploads the next day. And the yeah that data is analyzed, and we'd use, I don't know if you know Marco Altini at HRV for Training, but basically he and others use our method, which we published in 2013. That's again Dan Plew's PhD. But yeah, we use that same method where we're looking at 60-day rolling average as your normal value, right? And then we're comparing a 7-day rolling average of that marker with the 60-day. And if all of a sudden the 7-day, the acute phase, falls inside or outside, we lodge a bit of an alert, and we just mention, oh, if it goes up above, it suggests that you're adapting to the training, the aerobic training. But if it falls down, if the 7-day falls below the 60-day norm, that's worth mentioning also, that this is a bit of a warning here.
Yeah.
The parasympathetic system seems suppressed, so the rest and digest system of the central nervous system seems depressed, and we might want to tomorrow either take a rest day or just do aerobic training. We wouldn't want to hit you with some severe, stressful HIIT workout that's going to exacerbate the system. So again, back to the individual, it's optimizing for that situation as well. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I love that. A couple follow-up questions on that. So, how did yourself and Dan come up with the 60-day rolling average and the 7-day rolling average? And then the second part of that question is, if I'm beginning to use Athletica and say I don't have historical data, but I do have a watch that's able to get my HRV, do I have to wait until I get 60 days worth of data? Like, how does that work in that scenario?
Yeah, those are good questions. In terms of like, why do we choose 60 versus 7? Again, it would go back to with the, go to Training Peaks and the performance management system there. Why do they use 42 days versus 7 days in their acute versus chronic training load? You need a long-term marker and you need a short-term marker. So, it's how long is a piece of string? We've chosen 60 days. Marco's chosen 60 days. We're looking at, we want to look at acute versus chronic. So 60, we can say that's your chronic marker, right? And then with 7, this is like, it's acute. So something in your recent past has changed, right? So I'm just even thinking to myself, I've had a particularly stressful week right now with just in life, with a lot going on with all my work. We've got visitors here from overseas, and it's just like overall, this is just a really stressful week. And right now my 7-day is kind of tracking below my norm. But I know these people that are in my home right now, bless them, they're gonna leave. I'm gonna go back into my sort of normal rhythm and whatnot, and my 7 day is going to climb a little bit above the 60-day. But it's the same thing for training or any other sort of stress that goes into life. So that's a long-winded explanation for why we chose those two. And I think I've lost where we went with the second part of the question. Do you remember?
If I'm a brand new user to Athletica,
Yes,
do I have to wait to get 60 days worth of data, or
you
how would
do.
that work in that scenario?
Yeah, you do. We also, so we're not just measuring the heart rate variability. We do also track the heart rate, so the resting heart rate, and also sleep data comes in there too. So if you're just coming into Athletica and you actually have that, you've been collecting that data, then just like your training data, that's going to be uploaded after about 12 hours. Takes a bit of time for it all to come back in from Garmin. But yeah, that's within a day or so, you should be onboarded and good to go with that assessment of where you're at. But of course, if you're just starting out from scratch and you're just going to buy a Garmin watch, well, day one starts from today. I'm afraid that's just the way it is.
No, that's great. That's great to know. Yeah, because there might be people that are in different points of their respective journeys, right? So they might have different
Mm-hmm.
entry points into Athletica.
Yeah. But we also, like, if you don't have a Garmin device and you've been capturing it on like a Polar or something like that, you can also use Strava, say for example, and we can upload the Strava data. Anything at this point in the game, this could change in the future, but at this point of the games, anything you can upload to Strava, which is just about anything, you can also upload to Athletica. So now I will say that's with the exception of heart rate variability, where we're currently working with another I guess it would be like a sensor onboard API to merge and bring more wearable data into Athletica. But we're not there as of recording. We're not there yet, but this is actually being worked on by our development team as we speak. So it won't be long, and that's we're gonna have more and more sensors kind of coming into Athletica.
Awesome. So already stuff behind the scenes going on.
We're a team of about 10, with a mobile development house in Vietnam, which
Okay.
is about another 10 individuals. So yeah, there's a we started with just me and Steve, and then but yeah, like we've grown, and yeah, we've got a whole team behind us, and yeah, and again, we're really keen to speak to anyone out there that finds this of interest, and thinks there could be benefit of partnering. We'd love to hear from you.
Very cool. So Paul, where do you think the landscape is going to go in the next 5 to 10 years in regards to training and artificial intelligence? Where do you think it's going to go, and where do you think we have to go?
Where do I think it's going to go, and where does it have to go? Well, it doesn't have to go anywhere, right? And but I think it will go is, it's for whatever reason we just seem naturally um, keen or interested in optimization, right? And especially when you're talking in the circles that we do, performance is you know, is what we're all targeting. So when you're talking about performance and efficiencies, artificial intelligence, goes a long way towards doing that. Now let's just take, the one that most people are going to be familiar with now, Chat GPT, right? It's being used by a lot of people and has a lot of different usages. It's incredible, right? And it just gets better and better every single day if you follow that. So we're going down this path kind of whether we like it or not, and which is again what I knew 10 years ago that it would eventually sort of happen. It's been a long time coming, but yeah, I think that's where it will sort of continue to go, especially as more sensors come into play. We see a new one every day, and then more platforms like Athletica, which are the whole focus on Athletica is intelligence and trying to answer a coach and athlete's most important question: what is the training that I do um, today or tomorrow, right? Like that's what we're trying to do. And you'll see that actually when you go to Athletica. We're not black box. This is kind of our unique selling proposition, is the fact that we are open and transparent about everything we do. It's all published in our book. This is the roadmap. So that back end team, they're basically reading this every day in terms of how things have to be applied for the coach and athlete. It has to be applied according to the textbook and in accordance with science, just like your foundation, Science of Rowing, right? Like it has to have good evidence informed sort of backing. And yeah, I think I don't know if I'm answering your question that well, but I think it's going to go further and further down that road of optimization. What we also want to be doing is making sure that we're educating the user. We're so because we have a pedagogical background. We're educators like yourself with doctorates, and this is what we want to do. We want to tell people, continue to give them insight into what's going on, and we're doing that better and better now. We've got this really cool Athletica avatar that sits on the side of your training calendar, which does a lot of the analysis for you, like an assistant coach, and it's telling you the coach what we're seeing in every individual athlete in terms of how they're tracking, and because the coaches know the context. They're the ones with the people skills, not the computers. So I think we're going to see something where we see this optimization of the AI alongside coaches that know how to use these products and still have their relationship with their athletes to be able to deliver the best training session that gives them the most bang for buck on any given day.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Paul, where, if I'm an athlete or a coach, what are membership or subscription options that are available to me, depending
Sure.
on if I'm coach or athlete?
Sure. So if you're an athlete and you want to you're kind of self coached, you want to give this a try. Just check. First of all, I think go to the Science of Rowing and find the Athletica link there, because I think there should be a what do you want to call it, an affiliate program that's kind of going on there. So because we want to support Science of Rowing. But second of all, make sure if you are, yeah, it's regularly $20 a month. But of course, there's discounts for 6 months and an annual subscription as well. So that's for an athlete. For coaches, you can again, if you're a large squad, feel free to contact us and we can work on bulk rates. But the coach platform is free to use. So you can just go on and use it, and you pay, you the coach or the organization pays on a per athlete basis which is in line with the value that I just mentioned, but we discount further for coaches, especially with when numbers hit certain targets as well.
Very cool. And Athletica is primarily focused on the endurance sport
Yeah,
population. So triathlon, running, cycling, rowing.
correct.
Any other endurance sports I'm forgetting or missing?
Yeah, well, there's the sport of duathlon, which is kind of a version of triathlon, and then we're just putting cross country skiing together as we speak as well.
Ooh,
Sort of
very
the
cool.
sixth endurance sport there too. Yeah.
Very cool.
I should actually tell you a little bit more about how it actually works. And that's from the simplicity standpoint, you just basically plug in your race dates. So if you connect your wearable, plug in your race dates, you've got that adaptive plan. And for the coaches out there listening, like you think about how long it takes, at least for me, sometimes to make a periodized plan to go and
Yeah.
optimize, like for an athlete, and to individualize. It takes me a bunch of time, right? So it's like this is again back to that inefficient or efficiency comment that I mentioned. If we can improve the efficiency of the prescription for you, the coach, also offer assistant coach monitoring along the way, you can work more on the importance of the communication factors, right? Like, which we know are so important. Things like belief and buy-in in the program, the psychological components go so far with athletes. If they believe they're getting the best plan, and you, the coach, can make them believe that, and then you actually have a program also that is helping to optimize the physiology. You put the two together, and you are going to have absolute beasts in your possession that can win races.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's uh, it's really cool to hear the development and the ability for the platform to continue to learn at an individual level about each athlete. And you're connect your Garmin, you plug in your race dates, and the training program becomes in a lot of ways a living document. It adapts, it modifies, it evolves based on how you're responding or not responding,
Mm-hmm.
and what's going on in your life. It is there any other platform that's doing what you're doing right now?
Not that only in the triathlon world, there's two competitors, and that's healthy. We have great respect. There's one called TriDot, which is for triathlon, and it's owned by, or at least they have partnerships with Ironman, so they focus a little bit more on that sport. There's another one called Human Go, which also focuses on triathlon. But again, I don't think there's anything like ours yet, where they have a backbone of a textbook behind it that's really more in line with your philosophies that I know you speak about at Science of Rowing. I did want to actually mention two features, if you wouldn't mind me just
Yeah, of
mentioning,
course.
Joe.
Go for it.
So the first one is the Workout Wizard, and that is a super cool one because you can actually, like, you go into, so just about every single training session on Athletica, you can switch it up. But the cool thing about it is you can switch it up to something that is appropriate for that individual. Because I would, as a coach, I would always get this complaint sometimes when I would, there would be rationale in my mind to putting the same session in a plan, or a similar session at least in a plan, on a week to week basis, because you can see progressions in that. But some athletes, they want to have variety, so we get like instant variety. You basically click on your wizard and you can look at, you can get things for different durations but the same workload. You can get, just look at a variety, and again, you can just sort of swap that in terms of getting like a similar level of neuromuscular anaerobic targeting, but done a different way, so that you just, like, the athlete is happy because they've got their variety, but you still hitting that physiological target with your weapon, as we mentioned sort of before. And then there's an injury tab too, right? Like, the athlete has a niggle. Well, let's dampen things for the day. So that's a super cool feature that's really popular. And then the last one, which is very certainly exclusive to Athletica is something called Workout Reserve, and it really looks at this concept of maximal mean power, running maximal mean power. So imagine you're on a you're on like your concept 2 ergometer, right? And you can actually wind up. This is in real time running actually on our Garmin app. You can actually see how that power is that you're producing relates to the historic data. Like, so we basically look at like the last 6 weeks of data and how much you are producing in power relative to 6 weeks ago. So again, looking at the recency kind of aspect,
Yeah.
right? And also, you think about from the concept of injury, right? If your workout reserve is already tanking and going to your battery goes like below zero, meaning like you're hitting a personal best, and then you get injured because of that, well, I wonder why you got injured. You've done something that you haven't done in the past, right? And there's certainly a factor there. So by having the workout reserve marker in every single session analysis, so every graph, you will see what you've done in that session relative to the last 6 weeks of intensity. Super powerful. This is being used by pro cycling teams that we have relationships and partnerships with as well. So you can kind of again, just for the trust factor, this is something that just does not exist anywhere else.
Yeah, incredibly helpful to be able to immediately look across the last several weeks and see how
Yeah.
your performance.
That's right, because say you had a few athletes in your boat that they're missing sessions or something, right? Like, and then all of a sudden they come back onto the boat and you know, they're doing the same thing as all their buddies, right? And then they're going to have completely different workout reserve profiles. One's going to be completely protected and safe. They're probably not ever dropping below maybe 20% on their workout reserve. Well, those guys that just returned, they might be down in the tank and they might be going minus 10 right into the battery. And maybe that's a reason why something needs to be a bit more done individual, where maybe they could have been on the erg a little bit better or something before. So it just helps with the learning process.
Yeah,
Everything is always a running learning process, right?
yeah, that's an incredible amount of insight. That's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Um, well, like a final question for you. So tons of capability and functionality within the platform. Stuff I'm like just kind of geeking out over here as I listen to you. Um, what if I'm a coach, pretty seasoned, lots of experience, but perhaps maybe not the most tech savvy individual? What's the learning curve and kind of user friendliness of Athletica?
Yeah, look, I will be honest. So knowing that I am, again, I told you about my experience in New Zealand, right? So I know your culture, and I'll have to say that I'll be open and honest that we need to do better there. We need to be, and we are working on that to have more, tutorials and webinars that teach this thing, and more AI automation. In fact, because that's AI does that so well now with large language models, but trying to teach coaches actually how to leverage all of these different advantages that we've just kind of outlined, especially the last ones in this little bit with workout reserve especially is such a powerful tool. I would also say this is really where a schooled up um, research assistant or assistant coach can really make a difference in the program of a coach, right? Where they've maybe that person, I'm thinking someone like yourself, Joe, where you've got like that science background, you totally you pick up these things that Athletic has quite quickly, and you're a real asset to running beside an experienced coach that has that coach's eye. And you is so important, and they instill belief in their athletes, and they win medals as a result of it, right? But the combo of the two is always the best, I find.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Paul, we've got more in store for the audience. We're excited to get this interview out to both our respective membership bases and folks that follow our podcast, but also um, some of the things that we'll be working on from a content development standpoint and collaboration. That'll be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's, just to go back to that question that you had, like, and I'm thinking on the fly, there's the opportunity, right? For rowing coaches, we want to do it through Science of Rowing if we can. So if we can, co-create some content there, well, there's probably our answer in terms of how we bring these really valuable features to life and disseminate them, that's your wheelhouse, right? That's what you guys do at Science of Rowing. You guys are all about dissemination and disseminating the science and simplifying the science and making it actionable for coaches and athletes.
Yeah, and then on your side of things with Athletica, just evolving what is capable from a platform standpoint and the athlete and coach experience standpoint of it's a total evolution of what's been available in the last 15 to 20 years. The level of detail and insight that can be provided is kind of unparalleled at the moment. So it's going to be really cool to be working with you and to see Athletica continue to grow and develop and evolve, because artificial intelligence is definitely here to stay, and I think it's going to be a major asset to teams and programs and athletes and stuff. So it'll be fun to see it all unfold over the next several years.
I couldn't agree more. And, just so grateful for, there's obviously a hunger for this in the rowing community as well, too, right? Like, so, so excited to partner with you guys, but, Faster Master Rowers as well. We're partnering with them. We've got high performance coaches and athletes like Martino Goretti, multi, world champion. I believe is he single sculls or is he?
I think it was the lightweight men's single sculls.
Lightweight men's single sculls, right? And his wife Sophie using the platform, and it's so. Yeah, like just out of the gates, only 2.5 months old, and we can't believe the reception. So we really hope it continues. We see the thirst of the rowing community for platforms like Athletica, and we just want to support everyone as best we can. Super excited.
Yeah, I think one of our earlier points that we were discussing is probably a great way to wrap things up. We were talking about how rowing can be such a traditionalist and at times dogmatic sport. And Athletica is going to be able to provide something that, in a very positive way, will shake things up. And I think for the athletes that are at the beginning or in the middle of their careers, it's going to be able to provide a fresh take on training and some new tools that a sport that is at times can be very, very antiquated and slow to take up new technology, new training methodology, what have you, any of those things. So I would say the sport of rowing kind of keep your eyes open and don't be surprised if some things start getting shaken up over the next couple of years.
Yeah, hopefully in a positive way.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, we're all evolving, right? So maybe it's part of the process, but we're just excited to be part of it. It's really great.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks.